We're about to spoil the Moogle out of the original Final Fantasy VII, its compilation entries, and the remake. You've been warned. Have you ever wondered why Aerith, our beloved flower peddler and last descendant of the ancients, is much more knowledgeable in the Final Fantasy VII Remake compared to the original work and puts new powers on display? Is she traveling through time? Is it the planet's doing? Is it all a dream? In today's analysis, we'll try to unlock these mysteries and present our theories about her new role in this multi-game epic. Greetings, fellow scholars of the livestream. I'm Kutakuma from the Cosmo Canon Observatory, and today we're continuing our series of videos explaining the additional plot elements and the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake. We know that videos and text-based essays containing many answers and solid theories about Aerith's knowledge and abilities already exist, but we feel confident in the prospect that we can provide additional insight and information not found anywhere else. If you haven't watched our previous analysis on those mysterious specters, also known as the Whisperers or Arbiters of Fate, I strongly suggest you do so now and then return to the video. Back already? Fantastic! Let's jump into the wormhole and see what awaits us on the other side. Aerith is probably the most important character to Final Fantasy VII's plot. Without her summoning Holy and sending the livestream to help, the planet would have been doomed. With this first entry in the Final Fantasy VII Remake project only taking place in Midgar, they had to somehow include that importance and solved it in a very interesting way. Like last time, let's start by presenting a few questions we aim to answer later in this analysis. How does Aerith know so much more than she should? How do her different actions influence the story? What does she do to Cloud, Marlene, Red 13, and Sephiroth's portal? Why doesn't she like the real sky? Why does she think about giving up in the flower garden? What is her role in this whole remake project? To start things off, let's read a few passages from the Livestream White chapters contained in the novel On the Way to a Smile, which bridges the gap between the original Final Fantasy VII story and the animated sequel movie Advent Children. Those chapters will help us understand a few things about Aerith, which we never learn about in other compilation entries, nor the remake.
She was an ancient. Thus, she was able to retain her own selfhood even within the flow of the livestream. When she wished it, she could dissolve that self and become off the planet forever, but it was too soon for that. But the one time she did stray dangerously close, she learned something important. His memories of Cloud formed the core of his will. She discovered there were many more spirits than before who resisted merging into the livestream's eternal flow. She dove into the current and rushed from here to there, seeking out spirits to help her, other ancients not yet dispersed. The fading shards of their consciousness responded to her call. Heartbreakingly few though they were, she infused them with her memories and gained their help. She realised the one responsible for sowing all that hatred was trying to manifest himself in the living world. He would begin by using others to act where he could not. Should she do the same? No, she thought. Even if that's possible, I don't want to appear before Cloud as someone else. I want him to see me as he knows me.
Those were just a few excerpts pertinent to our analysis, which is why I recommend reading the full chapters online. Link is in the description below. Another very important piece of information for this video is contained in a quote about Aerith from scenario writer Kazushige Nojima, which is part of a larger interview in the remake's Ultimania book. Aerith is the utmost important person in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I was very careful with her lines. Each and every part of her carries a great meaning throughout the story, and I used that premise to write her character. According to that statement, all of Aerith's lines are carefully crafted with intent and neither random nor casual. Please keep this in mind throughout the rest of this video. This is very important. And with this knowledge in our backpack, let's go through the game and dissect all scenes where Aerith exhibits deeper knowledge or new abilities not seen or present in the original game. We'll skip the intro for now and dive right into the action, where Cloud first meets Aerith in Chapter 2. The encounter plays out quite differently from the original in terms of tone and motivations. There, Aerith wants to know what's going on and only offers Cloud a flower when he starts talking about them. Here, Cloud doesn't feel like talking at all due to Sephiroth's meddling, and tries to ignore her. But Aerith practically forces him into taking the flower for free, even though she charged him with 1 gil in the original if Cloud chose to accept the flower in the first place. This choice is gone now. Cloud can try and reject her, but this only changes the dialogue and not the outcome. But that's not all. Aerith talks more relaxed, friendly, and determined, as if she was already waiting for Cloud. She even tells Cloud to give the flower to his quote-unquote girlfriend if he declines the offer the first time.
Plus, it'll make your girlfriend stay. I guarantee it.
Does she already know about his connection to Tifa? It's not the first time she does this either. It's just a sales tactic? Maybe. But why is she so relaxed after this Mako reactor explosion? And why does she pull every trick at her disposal to make Cloud accept the flower? Her line about Cloud being worked up about someone being after him also seems rather curious. She doesn't know about Cloud's 2 prior Sephiroth hallucinations, and thus insists that nobody is after him, as it was the case in the original, implying she operates on that knowledge. Without that, she wouldn't be so sure about this. Her explanation for the gesture of giving Cloud the yellow flower, for free no less, is also very telling. While the English translation took the liberty to add the context of lovers, the core meaning is still the same. Giving this yellow flower to someone is a symbol of reunion. Cloud and Aerith never met before, however, so this meaningful gesture raises some alarm bells. In Aerith's eyes, their meeting here constitutes as a reunion, and Cloud giving the flower to Tifa in Chapter 3 happens in context of a reunion as well. Just when the whispers appear again, Aerith reaches out to Cloud, genuinely scared, and firmly grabs his arm. That's when both are able to see the whispers. What's also important here is that something happens to Cloud, and it's not just the ability to see the whispers. Cloud's shocked expression is unique to Cloud, and nobody else is shown reacting this way when gaining the sight for the whispers. There are only 2 other instances of such a shocked expression when coming in contact with Aerith: Marlene and Red 13. More on that when we get there. Furthermore, whenever there's such a focus on Cloud's eyes, memories are involved. Like when seeing Nibelheim in flames, after talking to his mother, when Aerith says Zack's name, and many others. With her grasp, Aerith accidentally transfers some memories to Cloud, which will have a lasting effect on him throughout the game in the form of visions. More on that in another video. We won't meet Aerith again until Chapter 8, but that's where it becomes interesting. When Cloud teases her about her special materia, that she just doesn't know how to use it, Aerith replies with,
"Could be,"
instead of, "I know how to use it," and just doesn't do anything. This is a very specific change in a conversation being otherwise virtually identical. After Reno enters the scene, Aerith already pronounces Cloud her bodyguard and knows that he's a soldier. Not only that, she follows up with bodyguard work not being too different from merc stuff. Guessing the soldier part makes sense due to Cloud's uniform and the sword and his eyes, but that he's also a merc? That's way too much a coincidence. Even Cloud notices the strange clairvoyance, which leads to Aerith's unconvincing excuse.
I guessed. From the sword.
This unfortunate information dump leads to a different outcome, prompting the Whispers to intervene, which Aerith didn't seem to have anticipated. She's very surprised that they don't attack this time and even save her from a painful fall.
They saved me.
Makes sense, as she's instead supposed to slip down the rocket wreck. After the whispers disappear, Cloud asks,
What are they?
Actually, I don't know. Let's just go.
Aerith seems to suspect something, but can't talk about it. She seems to realize that meddling in important events is what calls forth these specters, and lo and behold, no more whispers for the next 4 chapters, this one included. From now on, there are so many small but sometimes very significant hints in Aerith's lines which can be overlooked very easily.
Shall we mosey on over?
Let's.
The fact that she uses the term mosey this early on is certainly not a coincidence, as it's contained in one of Cloud's most famous lines from the original game, "Let's mosey." Even if this is exclusive to the English version, it's quite curious that they placed it here. Senior Marketing Manager Neil Pabon started off the E3 2019 game presentation with the same catchphrase.
Alright everyone, let's mosey.
And the official English Final Fantasy VII Remake Twitter account has also used this catchphrase a few times. However, it might also be just a nostalgic reference for the English fans. After all, the weapon seller in the Sector 7 slums also used that term when scoffing at Cloud.
Think you can mosey up in here and have it your way?
What's more compelling is that she already knows that Cloud has no idea how to get back to Sector 7. While she might just be very perceptive here, there are too many of those perceptive moments. Very suspicious. After Cloud leaves her behind by progressing too far too fast, she gets back at him a bit later with the following line.
Maybe I'll go on ahead and leave you all by your lonesome.
In isolation, this sounds innocuous, but knowing the original story, this might allude to her leaving Cloud and the others behind when she goes off to summon Holy by herself after the Temple of the Ancients. Later, in the scrapyard, we come across a closed gate where Cloud has to move a green crate and monkey bar across to get to the other side. If we try to open the gate first, she already knows that there's a way to get to the other side only for Cloud.
Maybe there's a way to get over it? For you at least.
After we open the gate,
Thanks, Cloud. I knew you'd find a way.
Aerith drops a different line if we do this without approaching the gate first.
Nice work! Way to think ahead.
Meaning, we only hear her clairvoyant lines when we tried to follow the direct path. Curious. Their dialogue while walking towards Aerith's home is an interesting one.
So, Cloud, what's your favorite flower?
They're all the same to me.
Huh. You sure you want to say that to a florist?
Better than lying.
Here, it's established that Cloud prefers to say the harsh truth. However,
Then what'd you do with the flower I gave you? You give it away?
I did.
Ooh, to who? Tell me.
Don't recall. What?
Thought you didn't like lying.
so, right after he says that he doesn't like lying, she puts him on the spot with the question he doesn't want to answer truthfully and accuses him of lying as if she knew. Which she did, of course. After introductions in Aerith's home, Cloud worries about leaving her alone in case the Turks show up again. Unconcerned, she answers with,
It'd suck, but I've dealt with them before. Honestly, I'm much more worried about you. What if you get lost, huh?
Firstly, she wouldn't say that to a random merc who can clearly handle himself. Secondly, why does she care so much about him getting lost? She immediately turns the conversation around by repeating a talking point established during their escape. Cloud seems to share this way of thinking and replies with,
Quit acting like you know me.
which is hilariously meta. Of course, Aerith doesn't give Cloud any slack and immediately decides to escort him to Sector 7, just like in the original. However, there's a difference. There, Cloud asks her whether Sector 7 is far from her home and mentions Tifa. That's enough incentive for Aerith to show him the way to reunite him with an important person. In the remake, Aerith asks Cloud if he's gonna head back to Sector 7 and immediately offers to show him the way. she clearly sets up the situation for having a reason to bring him there. Why? To ensure the events play out as intended and to avoid further whispering. When entering the kids' hideout for the first time, Aerith drops another seemingly innocuous line.
I know this place is off limits to grown-ups, but if we want to rescue them, well, we gotta break the rules.
Quite the uncanny foreshadowing of this first installment's main goal. To save the planet, they need to break its own rules by removing the enforcers of the original chain of events. Just like they need to break the kids' rules to save two of them. Furthermore, on board the Highwind after the rocket flies into Meteor, Sid calls the planet a kid. Shortly before they return to the hideout with the rescued kids, Cloud suffers from another memory flashback of young Tifa.
Tifa? What's wrong?
Nothing.
Is Tifa like your girlfriend?
No.
Bet she's someone special.
Like during their first meeting, Aerith uses the word girlfriend, and even after Cloud's denial, she determines Tifa to be someone special to him. In the original, Aerith reacts with disappointment if we confirm her question about Tifa being Cloud's girlfriend. Here, she keeps pushing this narrative, as if she knows Tifa is Cloud's only option for the future. Right after the encounter with the guy that are sick, he's trying to resist the reunion's call, but can't snap out of it until Aerith interferes and tells him to get it together. An oblivious person would ask if Cloud's okay, or at least add an explanation to why he should get it together. Yes, Aerith did see Cloud in a similar state before in Chapter 2 when they first met. Still, wouldn't she ask him what his episodes are about, or at least offer him to talk about it? Her reaction and behavior here implies that she already knows about Cloud's troubles. Shortly after, Cloud asks her about Sephiroth. She innocently claims to have heard from the news that he was a war hero who died in an accident 5 years ago. However, her reaction to Cloud's speculation about Sephiroth still being alive speaks volumes. The camera zooms in on the lower part of her face while she replies with,
"Oh, right,"
hiding her eyes. This is a technique often used in Japanese media, especially anime, to show emotional distress or to hint at the character hiding something while being emotionally distressed. This fits our hypothesis, as Cloud's speculation breaks Aerith's facade of barely knowing anything about Sephiroth. Then, she breaks this moment quickly by hastily walking away without looking at Cloud.
Come on, let's go.
In the original, she calls Shinra's newspapers unreliable after the flashbacking calm concludes. In the remake, she calls the Daily Buzz a rag which prints awful rumors about the slums. It's obvious she would never take Shinra news at face value. After completing several side quests, the sun begins to crawl towards dusk and Aerith starts a conversation about Cloud's mercenary work. Cloud isn't the salesman type, so he'd rather leave that part to Aerith, to which she replies with,
All right, but don't think you can rely on me forever, mister.
A not-so-subtle foreshadowing. In this game, it refers to her absence after being kidnapped by the Turks. In terms of the full story, she's referring to her permanent absence after, that event in the Forgotten City. Both instances also affect gameplay, as we'll lose a powerful caster and healer. The next interesting dialogue happens on the elevated flower field in Aerith's garden, upon completing all 6 side quests in the Sector 5 slums.
It won't be much longer now. The flowers, they have something important to tell us. Something they need to share with us. At least, that's the feeling I get. But before they can, there's a final step that has to be taken. Otherwise, we won't hear them.
Right after talking about that final step, Aerith clenches her fist. It's causing her distress. But why? Option 1. Aerith refers to her own death, which is necessary for helping the planet to get rid of Meteor. Option 2. She could refer to a disturbance in the lifestream caused by Sephiroth, which needs to be eliminated to restore order and allow the lifestream to flow properly and ensure communication. However, this blockade might have already been lifted by the end of this first game. Remember Marlene tending to a few yellow flowers in her room before Elmyra calls to her? They clearly communicate with little Marlene when the water droplet falls. She immediately feels her daddy calling out from far away. The petals dancing in the wind during the scene transition to Barret solidify this sentiment. But what was preventing the flowers from communicating in the first place? Potentially, the planet's distress from its impending demise. With the future being reverted to a blank slate, hope has returned.
Maybe I should just give up. Honestly, it's what I do best.
Could have fooled me. From what I've seen, you're no quitter.
Well, today's special. That's why I've been working my butt off.
Isn't it strange for Aerith to even suggest that giving up is what she does best? From what we know, she never gives up on anything throughout the whole Final Fantasy VII compilation. She always goes through with an idea, no matter the resistance. She sends over 80 letters to Zack for years, and only stops when she senses his passing. She makes Cloud her bodyguard, forces herself upon him as a guide through the slums, and even keeps fighting for her friends and the planet after returning to the lifestream.
Maybe I should just give up.
But why give up on trying to make the flowers talk? She knows what needs to be done, so her resignation sounds like she's tried to achieve this many times, like a stubborn player trying to defeat a difficult enemy and dying to it over and over and over again. The rest of Chapter 8 runs analogous to the original. However, something interesting happens when Cloud fails to sneak out undetected multiple times. According to an interview with Motomu Toriyama, Aerith is the one cleaning up the mess bit by bit each time she catches Cloud outside of his room. She wants to make it easier for him to eventually escape. Convinced yet? Much more interesting, however, is their reunion shortly after, before leaving for Sector 6. Instead of waiting in front of the tunnel and having a simple conversation, Aerith acts and moves in a very similar fashion to her appearance in Cloud's dream after the events in the Temple of the Ancients. She peeks out from behind some debris the same way. She goes into his face using a similar pose, talks in a similar way, and walks or skips away from him at the end. While this scene had to be modernized, the similarities are too obvious once detected. It is also what triggers Cloud's vision with the Lifestream theme playing. Causing him to shed a tear. This next point might just be the result of a tutorial integrated into gameplay, but Aerith is unnaturally quick to suggest using the robot arm for traversal. She also quickly suggests moving containers with that arm, and even has no apprehension of being transported herself. Quick intuition or existing knowledge? She hasn't been through here with Zack as far as we can remember. After Cloud finally manages to return the high five, we arrive at one of the most famous places in Midgar, the Sector 6 playground, now called Evergreen Park. Here, Aerith increases her effort to ensure everything goes according to the original timeline, at least for now.
Looks shut. How do we open it?
More importantly, how about we take a break? Sound good?
No. I don't have time
Up there looks nice. Come on!
She ignores Cloud's question outright and directs the conversation towards taking a break. Cloud seems to be in a hurry in the remake while he never complained about taking a break in the original. Aerith ignores Cloud and climbs on top of the slide, forcing him to follow her. Again, Aerith acts almost too comfortable around Cloud during this scene. First, she scoots closer to him, and after his memory glitch, she's marveling at his eyes from only a foot or so away, most likely to distract him from his memory glitch caused by herself. She's already seen Cloud's eyes up close before, when she woke him up in the church and during their conversation in the tunnel to Sector 6. So why point out his eyes now? She also already knows about Mako eyes from Zack, which she does comment on briefly.
Your eyes.
Oh. It's 'cause of the Mako. All soldiers have them.
Yeah, I know.
Aerith generally acts as if she's known Cloud for much longer than a day, and possibly has enjoyed romantic fireworks with him? Maybe from within a cable car riding around an amusement park? Alternatively, it's possible that since she knows that Cloud's persona is based on Zack's, she's trying to find out how much they're alike, and attempts to somewhat replicate the moment she had with Zack in Crisis Core when she marveled at his eyes.
綺麗。瞳、綺麗。瞳。
魔光を浴びた者の瞳。ソルジャーの証だ。
魔光を浴びた者の瞳。ソルジャーの証だ。
Back to that glitch, which is a completely new element in the remake. In the original, Aerith answers with, "Doesn't really matter," to Cloud's question about her first boyfriend's name. Right after, the gate to Sector 7 opens. In the remake, Aerith hesitates several seconds and looks very unsure whether to say Zack's name, but does so anyway, causing Cloud's mind to block out the name and prevent itself from breaking. Aerith knows that she probably shouldn't say Zack's name out loud, as she never did in the original. Still, it seems she wants to test what happens when she confronts Cloud with a piece of the truth. Her last line of this scene is a very important one.
Gotta look forward, not back.
She clearly thinks back to her time with Zack during this scene, which is why she turns sad and apologizes for bumming Cloud out. Zack is dead. She needs to look forward and not wallow in sweet memories. Another new addition to the remake is Aerith showing Cloud the secret underground passage to Sector 7. We won't even need to use it until Chapter 13, so why show it to us now? Maybe to make sure that Cloud is able to guide Tifa and Barrett back to Sector 7 in Chapter 13? Interestingly, Tifa doesn't know about it while Barrett does.
The main entrance to Sector 7 is buried under rubble now. So how are we supposed to get back inside?
Underground passage in the park.
Good plan.
This suggests that Aerith already knows about their return to Sector 7 after Platefall. However, such a return never happened in the original, which raises a lot of questions. Why does Aerith want Cloud to know about the secret passage? She knows they won't use it now, as Tifa is going to show up any time now and their destination will change. Showing this passage to Cloud now would be counterproductive. But if she shows Cloud this passage now, so he can use this knowledge to lead the others to Sector 7 after Platefall, what exactly does she want to achieve with this? She also leads Cloud through the broken expressway filled with debris, monsters, and obstacles, instead of safe streets to and through Wall Market to reach the Sector 7 gate. Yes, that's how it happened in the original, but it's also the same path Cloud uses to lead Tifa and Barrett to that secret passage to avoid Wall Market and the Shinra troops in Chapter 13. It really seems like Aerith sets up everything here to make Chapter 13 happen and ensure they do come and rescue her after receiving Elmira's blessing to do so, besides keeping fate intact. Also curious is Aerith's behavior before the gate opens. She knows Cloud very well and is able to set up circumstances that make him hesitate and procrastinate from using the secret passage. The awkward silence and saying,
"So,"
at the same time reeks of a setup by Aerith. Remember, everything she does and says is important and deliberate. She tells Cloud to go on ahead, but at the same time knows that he won't let her return home by herself. They met bandits and other monsters along the way after all. The talk about a safer backup route home sounds bogus, but it doesn't matter as the gate to Sector 7 opens right when Cloud is about to enter the secret passage. Her orchestrated delay paid off. It looks like they arrived at the park a bit too early, which is why those additional scenes even happened. Why too early? Aerith's knowledge about the original timeline allowed them to travel more quickly. Cloud's quick chat with Tifa is new to the remake and results in her telling him to not worry and return to the others. Aerith also behaves differently. In the original, she's the one running after Tifa as soon as she realizes that the girl escorted in the chocobo carriage is the one Cloud was talking about at her home. In Remake, Aerith cuts off Cloud's walk back towards the gate and orders him to go after Tifa instead. It's how it happened in the original game after all, which Aerith aims to preserve. While she might know what happens to girls escorted to Wall Market in that chocobo carriage, she talks as if she knows everything about Don Corneo and how he operates in detail. She was also too far away to overhear their conversation over the noise of the carriage. Plus, Sam's delivery service is not just used for bringing in girls to the Dawn, but also for general transportation. Aerith also doesn't know about the trio, their roles, and their necessary approval to get into the Dawn's mansion either. Additionally, when Cloud hesitates, she grabs his arm with pleading eyes, which seems off for someone having no connection to Tifa whatsoever. Once in Wall Market, we witness Aerith being adamant about getting into the Dawn's mansion, no matter what it takes, and she's always at Cloud's side, making sure everything goes according to plan, barring one segment. After being blown off by Leslie and his goons, Aerith tries her hardest to join the audition, at Chocobo Sam's, at Madame M's, and even tries to get an audience with Andrea Rodeo. She also insists on joining Cloud in the tournament to make sure that they win and score the dress for her. After getting dressed, she makes sure to get Cloud into the Honeybee Inn so he can get dressed up as well and receive Andrea's approval. Aerith's relentless push to get into the Dawn's mansion as candidates certainly rings some alarm bells, especially after all those horrible things she tells Cloud about the Dawn to make him chase after Tifa. Once reunited, Aerith greets Tifa as if they're already friends. Even Tifa's hesitant reaction suggests this.
Hey Tifa, how you doing?
Okay.
Oh, right. I'm Aerith, a friend of Cloud's.
Aerith's "oh right" in the middle suggests that she remembered that Tifa has never seen her before, and then introduces herself. As a result of Aerith's connection to Tifa, the girls grow close much faster compared to the original. When she tells Tifa not to worry about the audition's outcome, as it will be the same no matter who gets picked, Aerith sounds very confident, while Tifa seems hesitant and overwhelmed by the situation.
Then your worries are over, aren't they? Because the other two candidates are right here, right?
Right.
So yeah, if we're all in on it, then nothing can go wrong.
I guess not.
Aerith knows what to do to ensure the original chain of events. No whispers have shown up since the incident in the church, and she'll make sure it stays that way. Until Chapter 12 starts. During the next 2 chapters, there are several scenes where Tifa and Aerith talk about the imminent plate fall and whether Don Corneo was lying or not. Each time, Aerith talks in a way as if she knows it will fall. Right after defeating Abzu, notice how Tifa is still skeptical, but Aerith makes sure that they also think of the possibility that Corneo was telling the truth, which he was.
Hey, you don't believe that crazy story of his, do you?
But if he was telling the truth, and there's still a chance he was, isn't there? Then we should go.
Before crossing the wobbly bridge, pay close attention to Aerith's reactions.
But what if Corneo really was telling the truth? We have to get there in time to stop it. We have to.
Right.
Aerith, what are you not telling me?
Huh?
When Tifa says that they have to stop the plate from falling, Aerith looks down with a sad expression. Very suspicious. Tifa notices her strange reaction too, but before Aerith is forced to explain herself, Cloud interrupts the two. You got lucky there, Aerith.
Still thinking about the plate?
Yeah.
The future isn't set in stone. That's what I always tell myself.
Aerith believes we can shape our own future, despite the Whispers trying to uphold fate. But for now, she tries to not deviate at all, which explains the Whisper's absence. After they see the first Shinra chopper flying by, Tifa's heart sinks visibly. While Cloud tries to shrug it off as just a patrol, Aerith reassures Tifa that they will make it in time.
Don't worry, we'll make it in time.
Her line implies that the threat is real, but they'll make it there in time to help, which is exactly what happens. Also notice Aerith's praying stance while saying this. In most other situations where she switches to that stance, she seems to be in communication with the planet, like before the ghoul boss battle, in her Chapter 14 resolution scene, or when telling Amira about her dead husband. When the door to the maintenance facility opens by itself, both Cloud and especially Tifa feel very uncomfortable entering it, given all those ghost vibes and the rumors. To keep both going, which is very important to reaching the pillar in time, Aerith pulls the jealousy card for Tifa and the bodyguard card for Cloud. This leads Tifa to claim her part of Cloud for herself, his still free right arm, and with both girls depending on him for safety, even if partially fake, Cloud takes the lead in entering the ghost house. Mission accomplished. Well done, Aerith. After moving the first of 3 locomotives, the trio overhears the conversation between Tseng and Reno, confirming Corneo's ramblings about Shinra dropping the plate. Tifa almost loses it, while Cloud reassures her with his usual logic and rational views. Aerith, on the other hand, does neither, and tells them that the only thing they can do now is to keep moving. She's being purposefully vague, and neither confirms nor denies any outcome while appearing very confident about the situation. You only do that when you know what's going to happen. At the start of Chapter 12, the scene before the battle against the Whispers contains more hints. Aerith can already feel the presence of the Whispers, but she doesn't see them yet. Neither does Tifa, who is looking around apprehensively before the scene even starts. This can mean 2 things. Aerith may feel the power controlling this flock of Whispers. This is the only instance in the game where Aerith is shown feeling their presence before seeing them after gaining the sight, which supports the sentiment. The other possibility is that the Whispers can control their visibility, like the ghosts in Chapter 11. When Aerith assumes her praying stance and pleads for passage, the Whispers finally appear in front of everybody and startle Aerith, proving that she couldn't see them before. She deems the Whispers agents of the planet, and therefore assumes her praying stance to communicate to the planet and ask for passage. However, she probably hasn't realized yet that the Whispers have been taken over by another force, which is why they don't listen to her. One of them is, of course, yet another purple, enigmatic Whisper.
We have to get past, whatever it takes.
This line, while perfectly reasonable in isolation, does have a knowing undertone. The original chain of events has been preserved for almost 4 chapters now, and our party is still not in the process of changing that, which should not trigger the Whisper's appearance here. Aerith knows this, and tells the others that they need to break through in order to get to the pillar in time. She knows how this part of the story needs to play out. Yes, the Ultimania claims that the Whispers appear to ensure that the party doesn't reach the pillar too early. However, neither we nor the characters get the impression that they would arrive too early. Later, when Tifa begins to utter her request for Aerith to get Marlene to safety, Aerith finishes Tifa's sentence for her, as if she already knows about her upcoming task. Tifa did mention Marlene's name when looking at the ghost girl, but that's about it. In her request, Tifa only mentions the bar, 7th Heaven, and nothing more. How did Aerith know that she would ask to save Marlene? She shouldn't know about anything other than Marlene's name from Chapter 11. Furthermore, Tifa seeing a ghost girl and calling her Marlene would suggest that Marlene is already dead. While subtle, this instance of Aerith's foresight makes it clear that she already knows everything. When Wedge fails to convince the gatekeepers to open the passage to Sector 6, Aerith manages to encourage him enough to try again and succeed.
Don't give up hope yet. We could still save a lot of lives.
You don't think we're gonna stop them from dropping the plate, do you? I want to believe that we can still win somehow.
Aerith knows that the plate will fall, as we see by her facial expressions. But she also has faith in Wedge, who is still alive and able-bodied, contrary to the original, to take this new opportunity and save a lot more people. However, she needs to encourage him first for him to successfully pull it off.
But something in my gut tells me we're due for a reckoning. Just this feeling. Know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. But that's no excuse to give up. I don't want to look back one day and wish I'd done it different. Right here, right now. I need to know I did everything I could.
Even if certain things are inevitable, like platefall, one can still try and make the best of it, which both she and Wedge are able to do. This is the second instance she talks this way, and it will come up again later. This scene never happened in the original since Wedge never gets up again, or at least that we know of. The passage to Sector 6 was therefore never going to open, preventing a lot of people from escaping. It's thanks to Aerith and Wedge that many more people managed to escape this time around. Yet another change enabled by her own meddling. Shortly after, Aerith talks to Marl as if she knows that the plate will fall, and the only thing anyone can do is to get as many people to safety as possible.
You all have to get out of Sector 7, now! Please!
Slow down. Do you know what's going on? What do they want with the pillar?
Well, there's still time, but...
They're going to drop the plate on us?
Yes.
Aerith knows about Shinra's plans from earlier, yes, but she shouldn't know about the outcome. Still, she tells everyone to immediately leave Sector 7, as if doomsday is inevitable. Saying that there's still time, and her sad expression and hesitation, confirm Marl's and our suspicion. The scene with Marlene is a very important one and contains 3 elements we need to discuss. Number 1, Barrett. When Marlene talks about her daddy, Aerith knows it's Barrett, without anyone ever telling her. While she did hear Tifa yell Barrett's name just before Wedge fell off the pillar's staircase, drawing this conclusion correctly, with such conviction in her voice no less, is too much of a coincidence. It's hard to say if Aerith saw parts of Barrett's physique from all the way down there, but if she did, Marlene's skin color would not naturally lead to this conclusion. Furthermore, after getting so many lucky guesses correct, we're way past believing in coincidence. While consoling Marlene, some sort of visual glitch happens, which looks quite similar to Cloud's memory glitches. This startles little Marlene and causes her to back away from Aerith. However, Aerith silently tells her to keep what she just saw a secret, and Marlene agrees. From this point on, Marlene seems to trust Aerith completely. What exactly happens during that glitch? We know that Aerith is able to transfer memories to other souls, as detailed in Lifestream White. We also hypothesized a memory transfer to Cloud in Chapter 2. We do have a confirmed memory transfer in Chapter 16, where Aerith deliberately touches Red 13, but more on that later. Important to note is that while Aerith lets out a surprised "huh?" when Marlene takes a step back, she doesn't seem surprised about the memory transfer, but rather about Marlene's reaction to it. But what did Marlene see or learn there? Aerith might have intended to pass down knowledge or memories about being a Cetra, and thus prepare Marlene to eventually become Aerith's living legacy. Another argument for the sentiment is Marlene's ability to understand the flower's message during her ending scene. Though, it's possible that she just showed Marlene her future, a life with Barrett, Cloud, and Tifa, to reassure her that everything will be okay, even if it might look bleak right now. Aerith's touch could also have been the catalyst to unlock Marlene's potential for understanding the voices of the planet. After all, she already showed signs of that in the original ending. whatever she did, it seemed to work, as Marlene warms up to Aerith immediately and shows deep trust. She also immediately notices that Aerith smells the same as their yellow flower. Is it just the passing of distress, or did Aerith's memory transfer also include an affinity for it? After Marlene shows Aerith the yellow flower, Aerith tells Marlene to remember it, which she does, as we see in Marlene's ending scene where she waters the yellow flowers. Speaking of... Number 3, the yellow flower. Aerith doesn't look surprised, but rather pleased that the flower she forced on Cloud back in Sector 8 ended up here after all, as if it was all part of her plan. Now follow 2 scenes where song is involved, with the first one happening right after the previous scenes. According to Aerith's surprised reaction, she didn't anticipate this encounter here, but rather at her home, where it happened in the original. Song quickly assesses the situation and doesn't leave Aerith any choice but to cooperate, due to the presence of Marlene. This prompts Aerith to immediately propose a deal. While this scene would also work without her additional knowledge, Aerith resolves the situation too quickly and determinedly for her lacking any knowledge about the original events. With the predicate of her knowing what's up, this deal is also the only way to preserve fate. Marlene ends up with Elmira and Aerith in Shinra HQ. But why was Song even able to catch Aerith here already? It's all thanks to our beloved butterfly effect, mainly caused by Aerith, which we'll get into more later. The second scene happens after the plate separation protocol has been activated. Instead of showing up in person, Song contacts them via remote video call. This makes sense, as flying around underneath the crumbling plate with a helicopter would be too risky. Additionally, thanks to Aerith's early capture, they had more time to return to Shinra HQ from where this transmission most likely comes from. But the more interesting part of this scene is that Aerith orders our party to run! You have to go now! Why would she do that? Even Song remarks that they have nowhere to go. Simple. Aerith knows that they'll make it out, because they're supposed to rescue her later on. The next opportunity to see Aerith is in her Chapter 14 resolution scene, which only happens if the player has garnered more affection points for Aerith than Tifa, and 5 or more in total.
Everyone dies eventually, so we need to make the most of the time we have, to live our lives the way we want to live. Every minute, every moment matters.
Those lines exhibit the same sentiment as her speech to Wedge in Chapter 12. In addition to talking about the lives lost in Sector 7, she heavily foreshadows her own death. Why? She talks about how everyone dies eventually while in her signature praying stance. Looks uncannily similar to this one event in the original, doesn't it? In this scene, however, she probably communicates to the recently lost souls, guiding them home. She also experienced death many times in one way or another, sensing Zack's passing, watching her mother Ifalna die in her arms, listening to the spirit of Elmira's late husband, and even finding President Shinra stabbed by Sephiroth. Death is inevitable, and an intrinsic part of life. One should savor it for as long as it lasts.
I'm grateful for all the words we've shared, for all the moments and the memories. You've made me more happy than you know. And I'll always cherish what you've given me.
Those lines sound too intense and over the top for someone she just met less than a day ago, and only really spent time side questing, approval and costume hunting, and trekking through sewers and a haunted graveyard with. This strongly suggests she's talking about their time in the original game and Advent Children, as their time spent there was much longer and more profound. Especially if you consider their date at the Gold Saucer as canon.
But whatever happens, you can't fall in love with me.
This is the line, which crushed everyone's hearts. Furthermore, It has so many implications. Aerith knows she will die not too long from now, which will make circumstances for Cloud this much harder, especially with his fragile heart and mind. She needs him to be able to focus on the main goal and not being clouded, pun intended, by hatred for Sephiroth, as that will make Cloud very susceptible to manipulation, as we see in the original game. Cloud also doesn't have his original persona and consciousness back and currently operates on one heavily influenced by Zack and is therefore not real. Aerith knows that Tifa is Cloud's future in the living world, and the one who helps him find his old self again. When Cloud tells Aerith that he is worried about her as well, not just Elmyra, Aerith apologizes, not for being a burden, but for already having led him on the path of love, which he shouldn't pursue, as explained before. Additionally, since she already knows about the original and Advent Children events, she's on a completely different emotional level and has a very different relationship to Cloud by now. She transcended from the love interest status a long time ago and can be considered Cloud's emotional guide to his true self, and thus his healer, just as she's the planet's healer. It's her main purpose. Besides those important lines of dialogue, we'd like to highlight another detail. Cloud is clearly dreaming here. However, Aerith herself is not part of the dream. She just uses his dream state as a conduit for communication. At the end, when the sun is about to rise, Aerith dissolves into livestream particles and we see Cloud waking up. We don't see him do that after meeting Tifa or Barrett. Moreover, this ability of hers is nothing new. She does the same in the original while on her lone journey to the Forgotten City before Cloud wakes up in Gongaga. But here's the big question. Is this the Aerith sitting in Shinra HQ? Or the consciousness of future Aerith sitting in the livestream? It's probably almost impossible to get any meaningful connection to the planet and the livestream on the 65th floor, roughly 500 meters above ground in the lifeless headquarters of the mega corporation which represents the antithesis of nature. When Aerith enters Cloud's dream in the original, she has already reached the sleeping forest, a place full of life and thus connections to the planet. She also talks in a completely different tone than usual. No sass, understanding, motherly, full of wisdom and knowledge, and thus feels much more distant to Cloud. Because of this, and the fact that she dissolves into livestream particles, it's therefore safe to conclude that Cloud meets future Aerith, calling in directly from the livestream. After some side quests, pixelated JPEG backgrounds, and a lot of running around the enemy's lair, we finally manage to rescue Aerith. However, Ren 13 is also released and startles the party. He looks feral, driven by rage and animal instincts, and immediately rushes after Hojo, only briefly paying attention to our party. Any sane person would run, but counter to all sanity, Aerith tells the others with a serious expression to follow her and runs ahead to catch up with Red 13.
We need to go. Aerith!
What the?
Come on.
Hojo gets away, and Red 13 turns around to approach the party. While the others are very apprehensive and get ready for battle, Aerith tells them off, remains calm, and approaches Red 13 fearlessly. She even says,
"This child's a friend,"
while smiling, and then extends her hand to calm Red 13. This only makes sense if she already knows about Red 13's nature and role in the story. She wasn't in Shinra HQ for long enough to get to know him after all, and she couldn't possibly know that he's still a child. According to Bugenhagen, he's 48, which translates to 16 in human years. As an aside, have you noticed that Aerith keeps taking care of children? The ones in Sector 5, Cloud with a mental age of 16, Red 13 as mentioned before, and the planet, which Sid calls a child as well. she's the ultimate mother in the world of Final Fantasy VII. Even Kadaj and Cloud call her mother when being guided by her through the livestream in Advent Children. Now comes the most important part of this scene. When Aerith holds her hand over Red 13's head, she casts some sort of healing magic on him, after which he's back to his old and calm self. However, this is no ordinary healing magic. This is something new, an ability she didn't have as a living person in the original game. She transfers an unknown amount of knowledge to Red, accompanied by the same glitch effect we saw earlier with Marlene. We now even see those purple-white memory streaks swirling around Red's head. This allows him to provide the much-needed exposition about the Whisper's nature, purpose, and role in the planet's grand plan later in Aerith's room, which is where we'll go next. By Chapter 17, Cloud has also caught up to the fact that Aerith knows more than she lets on, which is how this conversation even starts. This leads Aerith to briefly talk about the Ancients, who are called the Cetra, the stewards of the planet. This is why Aerith is such an important individual to Shinra. We know that the Promised Land represents essentially the afterlife, the lifestream. To find the Promised Land, one must return to the planet first. With extracting Mako from the planet, Shinra essentially drained their precious and sought-after Promised Land. Quite ironic, isn't it?
Listen to me. Please.
Aerith.
The Shinra Electric Power Company isn't the real enemy. It started with them, sure, but I promise you, there's a much bigger threat. I just want to do everything in my power to help. All of you. And the planet.
Because of the Whispers, Aerith can't spill the beans completely, so she needs to keep things vague. This threat obviously refers to Sephiroth and Jenova, for which Shinra is responsible. Aerith should not know about any of this yet. Tifa can't shake her suspicions about Aerith hiding the truth, and prods again.
I'm lost in a maze, and every step is taking me further from the path. Every time the Whispers touch me, I lose something, a part of myself.
In the previous video about the Whispers, we established that they're able to remove memory. By touching Aerith, they might remove her additional memory as she's not supposed to have them yet. Those lines have far-reaching implications, so we'll put a pin in it for now and return to this towards the end.
Follow them, the yellow flowers.
This line has been cracking skulls and brains all over the fan base. Understandably so. It's an inaccurate translation. Though it's strange that the translators added quotation marks, as there are none in other languages, at least not in German and Japanese. In German, this line merely adds a metaphor to the previous one and describes the upcoming visuals. In Japanese, she instead says, "The yellow flowers, they were my beacon," which means that the falling flower petals represent her loss of direction. Makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? The Japanese version insinuates that Aerith loses the beacon that guided her up to now, her future self. The English line, on the other hand, sounds more like advice or directions for the future. Or directions given to her in the first place? A yellow flower has been associated with Aerith since the reveal teaser from 2015. So a yellow flower breaking up into pieces represents how she feels when touched by Whispers, losing a part of herself. We'll skip an analysis of Aerith's painting in this room for now, as it's not directly relevant to our current analysis, and would fill an entire video of its own. So let's move on to the next section. When Sephiroth appears in front of everybody before Jenova's tank, Aerith recognizes him immediately and turns angry. That's not the reaction of someone who merely heard about the death of a war hero on the news. She knows about his nature and the threat he poses to the planet, as alluded to in her cryptic speech in her room and her reaction to Cloud thinking that Sephiroth is still alive. After the first time we switch to Aerith and Tifa using the PHS, the latter asks about Cloud's mental state.
Hey, you think Cloud's doing okay? He's been acting really weird lately, more than usual.
True, but it's Cloud. I'm sure he'll be fine. But what about you, Tifa? How are you holding up?
Huh? Oh, I'm fine.
Aerith knows about Cloud's identity crisis, but dismisses it immediately and redirects the conversation back to Tifa, who is not supposed to know about or dig deeper into Cloud's issues yet. Aerith wouldn't behave this way, even with the suspicions she would already have by this point, but rather help Tifa find the truth. That's probably why Tifa wasn't expecting this evasive reaction from Aerith, but lets it be for right now. Interestingly, the first time Tifa even tried to address Cloud's issues in the original was after their nap in Lower Junin. In the remake, she's much more inquisitive and has already shed some of her uncertainty. Very curious is that Aerith calls the elevator safe after their victory over the Swordipede boss.
Could this be a trap?
Don't worry, the elevators are safe.
Alright, if you say so.
She says this with such conviction that we can't dismiss this as an educated guess. There's also no indication for their safety other than Aerith's words, but this whole section wasn't even in the original game, so how would she know for sure? After the image of Sephiroth over the black cloaked man turns into Jenova, Aerith already knows about its nature, that it's the source of everything. She was still oblivious to it in the original game at that point. Sure, you could argue that her mother, Ifalna, told tiny Aerith about the calamity from the sky before they escaped from Hojo's lab. But she wouldn't know the whole story. When Barret is stabbed by Sephiroth, even Red 13 looks very distraught by this act, as if he's about to lose a dear friend, which doesn't make much sense as they just met 1 or 2 hours or so ago. He even sprints towards Barret before Aerith does, who displays a similar reaction. Both seem to feel much closer to Barret than they should after only having met him very recently. This is not surprising if we consider Aerith's additional knowledge and memories. She might also have transferred many more memories to Red 13 than we are shown, including parts of his own future. Furthermore, his line about Barret's resurrection carries conviction and doesn't sound like a logical conclusion.
This death was not the one ordained for you by fate.
As if he already knew Barret wasn't supposed to die here, thus Red's horrified expression when it happened. When surrounded by Shinra troops in the lobby, Barret is about to return the favor for saving Marlene and prepares for a suicide attack. Aerith immediately stops him, since they aren't supposed to fight here. Though she does seem surprised when Cloud comes to their rescue before Tifa arrives with their escape vehicle, as she did in the original. The team didn't meet up with Cloud until after they reached the first floor, to then make their spectacular escape through the window onto the highway below. Now, Cloud arrives early for his epic performance. When they first meet Sephiroth at the end of the highway, Aerith stops being cautious and drops some truth. After all, the Whispers are in doomsday mode anyway, so what could go wrong? Speaking of, she accuses Sephiroth of being wrong.
And you're wrong.
Those who look with clouded eyes see nothing but shadows.
Everything about you is wrong.
This Sephiroth we see here should not exist. His existence is against the planet's will. Aerith knows this, which is only possible if she has the memories of her post-Advent children's self, and knows about Sephiroth's current nature. Why? Because this version of Sephiroth also stems from there. but we'll get into that in another video.
He'd tell you that he only cares about the planet, that he'd do everything in his power to protect and preserve it. But this isn't the way it's supposed to be. There's no greater threat to the planet than him. Sephiroth has to be stopped. He has to be. And that's why I'm asking you to help me. I know that together we can do this.
Aerith seems to have a very specific view on Sephiroth and what he's about. It's possible that she is a bit biased and has clouded eyes, as Sephiroth put it, possibly due to her one-sided experience within and knowledge gained from the livestream. It would be in the planet's interest for Aerith to be 100% against Sephiroth, which is how he's able to easily manipulate her and the group into defeating Destiny and breaking him free of his prison. Interestingly, he claims to want to protect the planet, but he doesn't actually care about any of the souls residing within, according to Aerith. More on that later. Let's back up a bit again. Right after Sephiroth beckons Cloud to follow him and leaves through the portal, Cloud attempts to follow, but is then stopped by Aerith. Instead, she steps forward and casts some sort of spell on the portal. It looks a lot like her Healing Wind limit break, just with a different color scheme and similarities to the visual effect displayed during her memory transfer to Red 13. This tells us that Aerith imbues that portal with memories, changing it from a corrupt purple to a calming light yellow. But why does she do that? We don't know where exactly Sephiroth's purple portal would have led to, but we can assume that Aerith wants to make sure it leads to a safer place for them to enter on their terms. What do we see on the other side? A perfect replica of Midgar, as if nothing changed. Aerith's spell seemed to have projected her memories of Midgar in its current state into the other side. In our previous video about the Whispers, we showed you that the Whisper Harbinger copies fragments of this image of Midgar to gather debris projectiles to hurl at Cloud. During this duplication process, we see purple and white memory streaks, green tinted glitch effects, and even green livestream particles, similar to Aerith's memory transfer ability.
What will we find on the other side?
Freedom. Boundless, terrifying freedom. Like a great, never-ending sky.
She already talked about being afraid of the sky outside of Midgar in Chapter 8, and we'll mention it again during the ending. We'll get into that near the end of the video. Here, she references the world outside, especially one unrestricted by destiny and no predefined future.
If we succeed, if we win, we'll be changing ourselves. I guess maybe that's why I hesitated.
There's only one scene in the Singularity which pertains to Aerith, and it's right after the first glimpse of the future during the battle against Whisper Harbinger. After transitioning back to the party, Barrett is confused, and Aerith looks a bit apprehensive about answering. She then gives Red a serious look, and with it, the permission to reveal the truth. He complies uncomfortably.
A glimpse of tomorrow if we fail here today.
Both Aerith and Red seem to know exactly what that memory flash means, which also implies that both know the original timeline up to at least 500 years after the original game's events. In the ending cinematic, Aerith doesn't know what comes next, as her knowledge of the original timeline won't help in a world in which events can now go in any direction.
So, what now?
Aerith reassures Cloud that they can and will beat Sephiroth. Red chimes in with a completely different dialogue than in the original.
If it's to be a hunt, you could use a nose like mine.
Here, Red unconditionally lends his services to Cloud. In the original, he says that he'll go back to his hometown and will go with the group only as far as that. This is more evidence for Red 13 having received more knowledge than just the portion about the Whispers. Looks like Aerith needs someone who will guide the group, after she eventually passes away. Before it transitions to the credits, Aerith murmurs to herself,
I miss it. The steel sky.
The direct translation from the Japanese original would say, the sky. How I hate it. While it's a similar sentiment, the English version sounds more like a longing for the safe and known past, while the Japanese version condemns the real sky directly. We'll see why shortly. During the credits, after Hollow ends, several themes important to the story are played in the background. It starts with Aerith's theme, followed by the main theme, the Whispers theme, and then the main theme again. This tells us that Aerith is a very important piece of the remake's new narrative, as were the Whispers in this first installment of this multi-part epic. Now, let's go back to the very beginning, the intro cinematic. Here's where it starts to become interesting. Unlike in the original, Aerith has her eyes closed, and when she opens them, they glow unnaturally green when comparing them to other instances from pre-rendered scenes. This might be the point where she gains the first taste of additional knowledge about the original events. How? Aerith's post-Advent Children essence in the livestream connects to her former self through the Mako leak, illuminating her eyes. How is this possible? 2 reasons. Time works differently within the livestream, as detailed in The Maiden Who Travels the Planet novella, which tells Aerith's story in the livestream, starting from her death and concluding with repelling meteor.
In this world of Mako, Aerith knew that the concept of time and distance was different from the surface. The passing of time in the Mako held no meaning in the first place. The planet's history was made up of accumulated memories, all merged together and were always by her side. There were memories of the present and also of the past. The events that were inscribed into the memories had surpassed time and were all linked together as a whole. It hinted that time was moving into the future in the world of the living. As those new memories from the surface merged together with the planet, new life would be brought into the world as the energy from the planet is delivered.
Furthermore, Aerith is able to instill knowledge into other souls, and even use an avatar on the surface, as described in the Livestream White chapters. Right after this knowledge transfer, Aerith notices the Whisper's presence, which leads to a different behavior of Aerith compared to the original. Look closely at what Aerith is looking at. In the far back, we see reflections of a purple light source, the area that caught her attention. Also notice the flickering yellow light bulb. When she exits the alleyway, the tiled ground to her right also reflects purple light, which captures Aerith's attention again. This leads her to bump into a guy. As a result, several flowers fall out of her basket, and one gets stepped on by a crate-carrying passerby. Each difference to the original scene is caused by an invisible presence near purple light reflections. These scare her out of the alleyway and cause her to bump into the guy. Also interesting, the entrance to this alleyway is slightly cast into purple light when Aerith flees from the Whispers back into it in Chapter 2. But that same light reflection is gone afterwards, as if those purple reflections are congruent with the Whisper's presence. Curious. We'll go more into the meaning of the colors purple and yellow in a different video, so let's return to Aerith. It's clear she doesn't know what the Whispers are, and only senses an unknown and thus frightening presence. But why does it frighten her? In the interview, Nojima-san tells us that Aerith might have had bad experiences with the Whispers in the past. Why is that? What could have caused her to mess with fate prior to the beginning of the game? Our dear scholar Peeps Nibbles had an interesting idea. To make sure this memory transfer into her former self works, Aerith needs to test her skills first. She instills small fragments of knowledge into her former self at earlier points in time to see if it works as intended, which summons forth whispers who observe or even correct her deviation. Those deviations must have only been minor, as she can't see the whispers yet, only feel them, thanks to being etc. There's another possibility, but that's for later. Why did future Aerith choose this specific point in time? It's right before Sephiroth starts interfering in the original events. Additionally, using this moment of Aerith communicating with the planet leads to less confusion upon receiving that knowledge. We theorize that Aerith received her knowledge about the original timeline here, but most of it gets removed again by the whispers flying around her before she meets Cloud, possibly again before she touches him. That's why she already knows more than she should, but also seems oblivious to some details. What led us to this specific conclusion? Music and behavior. If we get Aerith into view immediately during Chapter 2, we can watch her desperately and unsuccessfully trying to sell the yellow flower to several people trying to leave the area after watching the Mako reactor explode. When observing her for longer, she stands in place, fidgets a little, looks around for more customers, and occasionally turns her head to peek down Loveless Street, the direction Cloud will be coming from. Why is she suddenly so desperate to sell flowers, right after such tragic catastrophe no less? She doesn't even do that in the original, and she's also not in dire need of Gil. It's possible that she just wants to bring joy to people in an hour of darkness. However, they seem to prefer artificial flowers. One such store lies just down the road on the other side of the plaza. It's also possible that she went off script already, threatening the upcoming meeting's occurrence while Avalanche was running through the reactor. This might have caused some loss of knowledge, which is why she tries to find the person who is supposed to receive the flower while being hazy about the details. Cloud's weird behavior and similarity to Zack might trigger her instincts. After all, he looks like a soldier first class and carries Zack's Buster Sword. Aerith's surprised expression might confirm this. To make sure the meeting actually happens, the Whispers hold Aerith in place to get Cloud's attention, or maybe even just to stop her from selling that flower. However, she feels their presence and gets scared. What about the music? In Chapter 8, from the moment Aerith wakes up Cloud and until Reno shows up, a piano arrangement of Aerith's theme is playing in the background. It's the same one that plays in Advent Children during their spiritual conversation while Cloud is riding his bike to the Forgotten Capital. Please note that this specific section can only be heard in the full piece from the official soundtrack, but it's the most unique one to any arrangement of Aerith's theme. This is a very strong hint that the Aerith we see and play as from Chapter 8 and onward possesses the knowledge and abilities from her post-Advent Children counterpart in the livestream. This is the only instance in this game where this specific track is playing. During Cloud and Aerith's first meeting, a completely new arrangement of Aerith's theme plays while she offers Cloud the flower. They could have easily used the Advent Children arrangement in Chapter 2 already, but they didn't. On top of that, it's the second time a track from Advent Children is being used this way. But more on that in the analysis about Sephiroth. With this huge pile of evidence and explanations in our metaphorical backpack, let's return to our questions from the beginning and condense everything we talked about into comprehensive and hopefully satisfying answers. How does Aerith know so much more than she should? We already established that she got all this knowledge from her future self, which is residing in the livestream. However, we've heard about two other possibilities. What if the planet itself feeds Remake Aerith this knowledge? Well, this one can be easily debunked. The planet works against Aerith and any change she attempts, through the Whispers. Providing her with that knowledge and then throwing barriers in her way makes no sense. What about Minerva? According to the Crisis Core Completion Guide's keyword collection, she seems to merely follow the life streams, and thus the planet's, instructions. This can therefore be dismissed as well. How does Remake Aerith receive this knowledge? The Lifestream White chapters from the On the Way to a Smile novel explains that Lifestream Aerith is able to instill memories into other beings. From Chapter 8 onward, Aerith seems to know about all events from the original timeline, up to and including Red 13's sprint through the valley 500 years after the original game. She also receives this additional knowledge from the Mako leak in the intro cinematic, but most of it might get taken away again by the Whispers. This is why we don't hear the Advent Children arrangement of her theme until Chapter 8. How does this additional knowledge manifest? Aerith knows too much about Cloud and his quirks, notably that he's a merc and an ex-soldier, and that he has no idea how to return to Sector 7. She also masks her knowledge by posing as an in-lore game tutorial of sorts. When they encounter a closed gate in the slums, her verbal directions are beyond obvious. How she leads Cloud and the player through the collapsed expressway with the robot arms also feels like she knows more about them than she should. She reacts to Cloud mentioning Tifa quite differently and is attached to Tifa more strongly. She drives the party to go to the pillar ASAP with the argument, but what if Corneo is telling the truth? Aerith knows about Marlene, her location, and about Barrett being Marlene's dad. She also knows that Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa can escape the Sector 7 pillar and survive an impossible situation. She accidentally imbues Cloud with knowledge about the future, shows some memories to Marlene, and actively instills knowledge about the Arbiters of Fate and the future into Red 13's mind. All of them react with a wide-eyed expression during this memory transfer. She has significant knowledge about Sephiroth and Jenova, the real threat to the planet. Some of those points are even confirmed in the Ultimania, the ex-soldier thing, knowledge about Marlene's location, and other facts as well as Marlene's and Red 13's expressions. Additionally, the Ultimania provides some specific examples from Chapter 8, 10, 12, and 18, which we've covered earlier. Since we're already talking about this, let's jump to the next question. What does Aerith do to Cloud, Marlene, Red 13, and Sephiroth's portal? She transfers memories to them, as detailed before. In Cloud's case, she did it without intent, as she was scared from the Whispers and wanted Cloud to help her get rid of those things. From that point on, Cloud has visions of the future when triggered by a related current event. The Ultimania practically confirms this. At the Plaza, in front of the pillar of the Sector 7 slums and the church of the Sector 5 slums, Cloud gets a visual hallucination of what seems to be from the future. Was it the effects of meeting Aerith? Credit for this translation goes to @IStanleyFF7 on Twitter. In Chapter 18, Aerith casts an even stronger version of her memory transfer spell at the end of the highway. The light encompasses the surroundings, copying it, and then turns the portal's dark purple tone to a bright golden light, granting safe passage on Aerith's terms. Which is why we see the same Minkar image on the other side. How do her different actions influence the story? First off, Aerith forces the yellow flower onto Cloud, telling him that it's a symbol of reunion. She sticks the flower into his suspender, blatantly visible for everyone, including Tifa, who notices it before entering 7th Heaven. This makes sure that Cloud gives the flower to Tifa and not Marlene. Without the option to give the flower to Marlene, she can't warm up to Cloud anymore. This causes her to get spooked when Cloud gets too close, resulting in Barrett flipping the metaphorical table towards him. Barrett doesn't accept Cloud into the group, and therefore doesn't let him into their hideout. Cloud talking about an invisible enemy might also have contributed to this, which was the result of the Whisper's appearance caused by Aerith's different behavior. This then leads to Barrett not hiring Cloud for their next mission. However, this summons the Whispers, who force Jessie and implicitly Wedge to stay behind, bringing Cloud back into the team. Wedge thus still has an unused grappling gun from Biggs at his disposal, and suffers much less injuries from the fall. This allows him to save a lot of people, mostly thanks to Aerith's encouragement. Side note, the existence of the yellow flower in 7th Heaven also increases Marlene's connection to Aerith when she comes to her rescue. Back to Wedge. He ultimately survives the plate fall, and his remaining cat leads the group into the underground Shinra lab. Wedge's continued existence then leads to an early attack on President Shinra by Avalanche HQ, and ensures safe passage to the helipad for the party. We think that the main Avalanche cell only starts the attack on Shinra HQ and the President at this point because Wedge contacted them beforehand and asked them super duper nicely to rescue Barrett's cell. It's how he ended up at the mayor's office after all. The next chain reaction starts with Aerith's loose mouth in the church. She reveals to Reno that Cloud's a soldier, which leads to an unfriendly exchange and eventually a battle between them, leaving Reno beaten and bruised much earlier. This in turn leads Rude to show up near the train station. He then later waits for Cloud and Aerith to rough up the former, kind of an eye for an eye, and to bring the latter to Shinra. Since Reno now has to face 3 adversaries on the pillar platform, Rude helps him out this time. And as he hasn't properly recovered, Reno's too beaten up to finish their mission, which then forces Rude to do the job instead. The third batch of changes originates at Aerith's new conversation with Wedge, which leads to a delay in events. The chopper crash happens before she reaches 7th Heaven, forcing her to take the long route. She picks up Betty, which slows her down even further, and she's then pushed to the ground by another explosion after that. This circumstance allows Song to find her in Sector 7 already, instead of on the way to her house. This is most likely the reason why Elmira refuses to let the party interfere in the first place, as she's not present during the sealing of the deal between Song and Aerith this time. This in turn forces the Whispers to change plans, and lets Wedge survive, hence the presence of the 4th Whisper compared to the 3 for Biggs and Jessie. This change leads Cloud and the others into the secret underground lab where they find the human experiments and thus the necessary argument to convince Elmira to greenlight Operation Save Aerith. The 4th interference in events begins in the Shinra building, where Aerith takes everyone to her former room after Cloud collapses. His call for the reunion might be triggered by the presence of those 2 robed figures who are already in the building, activated by Cloud and puppeteered by Sephiroth himself. In the original, the party plans to use the elevator to leave the building afterwards, which results in their capture by the Turks. In the remake, they don't use those elevators and find refuge in Aerith's old room instead, which is why they don't get captured this time. On top of that, they have Mayor Domino covering their tracks as well. We're not sure how the following change occurs exactly, but it doesn't seem like Elmira has plans to move out of Midgar anytime soon. In the original, Barrett advises Elmira to go somewhere else due to the looming danger. This doesn't happen in the remake, which is why they still reside in the Sector 5 slums in the ending. In addition to changing events, it seems that Aerith's additional knowledge allows the party to travel through certain areas quicker, leading to some early arrivals. In Evergreen Park, it takes Tifa much longer to appear. According to the Ultimania, they arrived too early at the Sector 7 Slums train station as well. Their arrival in President Shinra's office also happens earlier, as the president is still alive. Although this can be attributed to the lack of prison time and following the trail of purple goo right after its creation. Why doesn't Aerith like the real sky? It's a recurring thing for Aerith. She already talked about that in Crisis Core with Zack, and near the beginning of Chapter 8 after they flee from the church. It's why she is reluctant to cross the portal in Chapter 18, and generally doesn't look very happy in the ending cinematic. Furthermore, Nomura-san had the following to say in an FF7R Ultimania interview.
For Aerith, the sky symbolises sadness. The people who were dear to her, such as Zack and Mother Ifalna, had all returned to the sky, and the sky she sees above her in the slums was covered by Shinra too. The calamity that destroyed the ancients, Genova, also fell from the sky. All of these incidents remind Aerith of the sky, which is why she says she hates it.
However, it looks like this part of her character has been retconned during Crisis Core, as she never says anything of the sort in the original game. She was confined to Midgar her whole life, if you discount the short time in Icicle Inn before she got taken with her mother by Hojo. When the team leaves Midgar in the original game, she talks about leaving Midgar for the first time ever. If Cloud asks,
"Really? Are you worried?"
she replies with, "A little. No, maybe a lot. But I have a bodyguard, right?" This is in line with the compilation and the remake, but without the context of her hating the real sky. In the original, her worries stem from the huge and unknown world beyond her comfort zone in Midgar. In her original pre-rendered key art, the high wind and the sky both hold a lot of weight and emotion because of this. The blue never-ending sky, this boundless, terrifying freedom, and the high wind. On the cargo ship from Junin to Costa del Sol, when Cloud talks to a disguised Aerith, he can promise to take her on a trip with that airship someday. Alas, she passes away long before they even gain access to the high wind. A real tragedy. For the remake, the pre-rendered key arts for Cloud, Barret, Tifa, Aerith, and Sephiroth are practically identical to their original counterparts. However, Aerith's key art has an important part missing, the high wind. Of course, it's not relevant for this first installment, but its absence also puts much more emphasis on the blue sky she's so terrified of. At first glance, it's strange that Nomura talks about Zack and Ifalna having returned to the sky. After an organism dies, its spiritual essence returns to the lifestream, which resides within the planet itself, not the sky. However, when an organism dies, its life energy dissipates into the air. We see this in Advent Children with Kadaj after Cloud defeats Sephiroth, and we see this in the remake when we kill organic enemies, and when the ghosts are freed from Elagor's clutches. Our interpretation is therefore that life energy dissipates into the air, converges with vapor in the clouds, and is then distributed all over the place as rainfall. Rain is made of water, which represents life and is enriched with lifestream energy in this case. It therefore brings life back to the earth, just like at the very end of the remake, the only time it rains in the whole game. Why does she think about giving up in the flower garden? Remember Aerith contemplating about giving up, as it's what she does best? There might be a good answer to this strange line. She could be talking about giving up on Zack. She never fixed the flower cart, or had it fixed, and never set out to search for Zack herself. Instead, she wrote 89 letters, which never arrived. And then there's this. In Aerith's farewell story from the Final Fantasy 30th Anniversary exhibition presented at the Tokyo's Mori Arts Center Gallery in February 2018, visitors were able to hear a monologue from Aerith when standing around the recreation of her flower bed in the church. It's mostly about Aerith trying to say farewell to Zack and move on, which she only manages to do after Cloud falls through the church's roof. In one segment prior to that event, she says the following: "That's it, I give up. I can't stop thinking about you. Ugh, I can't stand this." Back to Remake, Cloud calls her out for not coming across as a quitter, and rightfully so. However, Aerith has an answer for this too. She calls this day a special one. In addition to knowing about future events, she might also feel like having gone through them herself, which makes the day of meeting Cloud again very important indeed. Cloud is also important to the planet's future, as he's key in defeating Sephiroth forever. However, Cloud's heart and mind are still fragile, and Aerith needs to make sure he's up for the task ahead. Additionally, she's grown to really like Cloud throughout the original game and beyond, which is apparent when reading The Maiden Who Travels the Planet and the Lifestream White chapters. And this could be another reason for why she makes an extra effort for him, which results in those additional quests, scenes, and events that never happened in the original. Without her additional knowledge, she likely wouldn't make such an effort for someone she just met and barely knows anything about. Unless we go back to that farewell story of Aerith's, where she also says, "Sometimes I see someone who has the same eyes. Same as you, I mean. And I wonder, should I ask? Do you know him? Do you know where he is?" But I never do. Cloud has the same eyes as Zack, and she probably can't wait to ask Cloud about him, but she never does. She does ask Cloud about his war buddies while they're traversing the collapsed Expressway.
Did you have any soldier friends? Any war buddies?
No, not really.
Oh, okay.
And also mentions Zack's name in Evergreen Park, so she at least tries to sneakily gain some information. The problem is that she knows about Cloud's false persona and identity problems, as we see in her resolution scene. Thus, she can't just ask him outright about Zack willy-nilly shilly-dilly without potentially breaking Cloud's psyche and disrupting the flow of history. Hence her hesitation to say Zack's name in Evergreen Park. On the other hand, didn't she feel and thus know about Zack's passing? Crisis Core's ending does heavily suggest this, though it's unclear whether he came by to say goodbye, like Elmira's husband. And since she already knows everything about the original timeline, where she eventually met Zack in the livestream, he surely would have been able to tell her all about those 5 years of absence. On the other hand, we do have a different answer for why Aerith wants to give up, and why the flowers can't talk yet, and we'll get to that real soon. Even so, the connection to Zack is still important to keep in mind. What is Aerith's role in this whole remake project? A very important one, according to Nojima-san, as we've established in the beginning of this analysis. Besides that, we can only speculate and try to establish a good picture according to existing information. Sephiroth tries to rewrite, nay, remake, history for another chance at absorbing the lifestream and using the planet as his vessel to travel the cosmos. Aerith tries to counter his actions by doing the same, rewriting history, but in the planet's favor. With the abilities Aerith and Sephiroth possess after Advent Children, this is certainly possible. The lifestream contains all the memories from the planet's inception to the present, as we've learned in The Maiden Who Travels the Planet. And according to the Lifestream White chapters, Aerith wants to appear to Cloud in the form he knows her best, which might be the reason why she chooses to do her work through her own past self. For further understanding, we need to ask additional questions. How does future Lifestream Aerith even manage to rewrite history? How does it all work? How are certain events already different without being the result of a direct intervention? How does Remake Aerith know about certain things that weren't even in the original game? This last section goes into crazy theory territory, so saddle your chocobos, strap in, and drink your goddamn tea! What if Aerith transfers her memories into the past not just once, but multiple times? What if her first and subsequent attempts at changing the past ended in a failure due to excessive and reckless changes, and the Whispers had to intervene and reset Aerith's knowledge along with the fate-endangering event to preserve it? There are a few instances in the game where Aerith displays knowledge or sentiments which cannot be explained by a single memory transfer to the past from the future, in terms of the original timeline. Those instances suddenly make much more sense if Aerith had to go through the story multiple times, but still retained the additional experience from each attempt. Let's check out those instances. In Chapter 9, on the collapsed Expressway, Aerith already seems to know that the robot hands still function, and will get them across. She also guides Cloud by giving him hints. Those robot hands were never a thing in the original or in Crisis Core, besides stage props. Still, Aerith exhibits prior knowledge about them. On the other hand, pun intended, this might just be the result of integrating a puzzle into the story and allow for providing hints organically, so this point might be a nothing burger. The next point, however, has more merit. In Aerith's discovery quest, upon completing all 6 side quests in Chapter 8, Aerith considers giving up on trying to get the flowers to talk. This last step seems to be hard to achieve. We already talked about possible implications, barring one. What if she refers to having tried to change the timeline so many times, without any success? And that's why she should just give up. There's also this interesting piece of information about Eligor, Chapter 11's second boss. In the special interview, digging deep into the world of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, Motomu Toriyama has this to say.
After leaving the train graveyard, the Sector 7 plate collapse kills a countless number of citizens, causing a disturbance in the livestream. The boss monster at the end of this chapter, Eligor, foresees this, and works to stop Cloud and his friends from reaching the pillar in time.
The enemy intel provides the following information.
A ghastly fiend that haunts the train graveyard and feeds on human fear to grow stronger. It is a manifestation of the memories and sorrows that linger in the train graveyard.
An influx of souls who die in fear would be a banquet of the ages for Eligor. But how can Eligor foresee an event that hasn't happened yet? Eligor might have kept this knowledge about the Platefall's victims from one of Aerith's previous attempts to rewrite history. Though it's also possible that he gains this knowledge from Aerith directly, upon capturing her and peering into her soul. Why capturing Aerith? Eligor might have sensed her inner fear of being left alone, on top of her stronger connection to the planet, which would bring in knowledge about the location of souls to feast upon. Let's jump ahead 6 chapters. Remember the elevators in the drum? Aerith claims that they are safe. Why would she know this? The drum wasn't a thing in the original. At all. This, too, supports the multiple rewrites theory, as changes in previous attempts and their reset might have led to bigger changes for subsequent rewrite attempts. Thinking further, it's entirely possible that Aerith, or even Sephiroth, tried to change the past even before the intro cinematic. This would explain differences in the Shinra building's interior, and other fundamental changes, which aren't possible otherwise. Anyway, it seems like Aerith went through the drum and Hojo's experiments at least once before. This would give her line,
I hate that man, I really do.
More weight, too, as going through this ordeal even once is bad enough, let alone multiple times. Though, to be fair, she had several unpleasant confrontations with Hojo in the past already. Now, let's go back to Aerith's very important lines in her room in Shinra HQ.
I'm lost in a maze, and every step is taking me further from the path. Every time the whispers touch me, I lose something, a part of myself.
Losing a part of herself every time the whispers touch her might refer to all those failed attempts at changing history the way she needs to. She speaks of multiple times after all. Her remake version loses all additional memories with each major intervention by the Whispers to get the original timeline back on track. It's entirely possible that the Whispers were about to reset Aerith's state to her original self here by removing all of her additional memories, but Tifa's quick reaction prevented it at the last second. Being lost in a maze is then a metaphor for all those failed paths ending in a dead end, and only one path is leading to her goal, which is what we experience in this game. Those multiple attempts at rewriting history might have led many parts of the story to incrementally change with each time, compared to the original story. For example, Jesse's mission, the Wall Market segment, the Eligor side story, the drum, requiring grappling guns instead of batteries, side quests in general, and additional NPCs like Marl, Chadley, and the Wall Market trio. But take this with a grain of salt, as most additions might just be vehicles for a modern presentation of the same story. Some of them don't contradict the original events in any way, and merely expand on it. On the other hand, certain characters exhibit stronger drives than before, impacting certain events. Barrett mistrusts Cloud more, which leads to their hideout being closed off to him. Cloud displays an increased focus on Tifa when they first meet in Chapter 3, as well as in Evergreen Park, where he chases after her instead of Aerith. It's possible that this is caused in part by Aerith priming Cloud by giving him the yellow flower, talking about a reunion, and telling him to give it to his girlfriend, if he made those choices in Chapter 2. His protector instinct also has him jumping out of a moving train with a hesitating Tifa in his arms instead of just following her lead as shown in the original. Speaking of, Tifa shows more guts to try and talk to Cloud about when exactly they've last met. She's more inquisitive in general. Lastly, Jessie is seriously thirsty for Cloud, even if most of it is just her having fun. Wedge also grows much closer to Cloud over time and appoints him as his bro, just like Johnny does. Every step that is taking Aerith further from the path could mean two things. Either she feels that each new attempt at changing the past brings her further from her initial goal, or each change during a single attempt increases the difference to the original timeline known to her. But why does Aerith need to relearn about the Whispers every time while retaining everything else? Each new attempt doesn't need to start at the beginning, only before an event she'd like to handle differently, which seems to be after the church in Chapter 8. This leaves everything before that intact. The events in the church might even be her second attempt after failing in Chapter 2 the first time. This approach sounds a lot like Chapter Select, doesn't it? As if we're manipulating the timeline just as Aerith does, just with different intentions, like collecting missed objects or getting different dresses, quest lines, or resolution scenes. But how and why did this whole convoluted mess even start? Either Aerith witnessed the end of the world, or found the preordained destiny somewhere in the livestream. However, there's never any indication towards the livestream containing information from the future. In any case, the end of the world is most likely caused by Jenova's complete corruption of the livestream. The planet contains this corruption, preventing Sephiroth from escaping the planet, and dies as a result, but saves the cosmic lifestream and other planets from sharing its dark fate. Jenova's cycle of consuming a planet's life energy and then traveling to the next has to be stopped, which is why Aerith needs to stop and eradicate Sephiroth and, with him, Jenova, once and for all. Unfortunately, Cloud is caught in the middle of this. Sephiroth wants to corrupt him too, in order to convert him to his ally in his quest.
Cloud, lend me your strength. Let us defy destiny together.
Conversely, Aerith wants to heal Cloud and bring out his true self, and be free from Sephiroth and Jenova, just like the planet. We see this in the original game multiple times already. But Cloud is not the only one who she needs to heal and prepare for saving the planet for good. She needs to heal everyone involved, to prepare them for their battles and prevent their souls from becoming corrupted in the future. She needs as much uncorrupted lifestream energy on her side as possible. Starting from Chapter 8, she keeps trying to break Cloud's shell and lift his spirits, with helping him with the mercenary work in Sector 5, the high fives in the collapsed Expressway, which concludes in the Coliseum, complimenting him, and implicitly bringing him closer to his childhood friend, who will eventually help him fully heal. She gives Tifa hope by subtly nudging Cloud towards her, which results in a stronger connection between the two. We see this multiple times across the game. Also, compare their resolution scenes. Aerith tells Cloud not to fall in love with her, while he and Tifa share a very important bonding moment, partly made possible by him watching Barrett do the same. Aerith also makes sure Tifa can return to her bar once more to come to terms with this tragedy. It's no coincidence that a somber version of Tifa's theme is playing during that section. That's why she showed Cloud that secret passage earlier, to ensure their return to Sector 7. In the same vein, Barrett gets to see Wedge alive thanks to their return to 7th Heaven, which lifts his spirits. Furthermore, Aerith's influence on Marlene allows for a deeper connection between her and her daddy, as we see in Marlene's ending scene. This connection gives both Barrett and Marlene strength for their tasks ahead. Red 13 is more familiar and connected to the planet than most other sentient life forms, mostly thanks to his heritage and Bugenhagen. Recruiting him as an ally as soon as possible is therefore crucial to Aerith's quest, which she does by granting him possibly the same knowledge she has. She also needs someone to guide the group in case the inevitable still happens. Wedge always wanted to make a difference, to have his actions matter. With Aerith's encouragement to convince the guards to open the gate to Sector 6, she grants him that wish. Furthermore, his drive to make a difference will help them in the Shinra building and bolster Barrett's morale as well. Aerith is in general all about making the best with the time we have, as seen during her motivational speech to Wedge and her talk with Cloud in her resolution scene. She keeps telling herself and others that the future has not been written yet.
The future isn't set in stone. The future is always a blank page.
We have to do our best with the little time we have to reshape our future for a better tomorrow. With all that being said, we now have a clear understanding about the role of both the Whispers and Aerith. At some point after Advent Children, Aerith decides to insert herself into the planet's memory and change the past to reset its future and thus potentially save it. This is plausible because she only instills her knowledge into other souls in the lifestream, according to the Lifestream White chapters, and not living beings. The complete accumulation of knowledge and memories of all prior events and life forms has already been committed to the Lifestream. However, the planet won't allow any changes to its state. That's why the Whispers, the cries of the planet, try their hardest to correct or even prevent all changes that would alter the existing flow of memory in the Lifestream. This means that fate is merely an accumulation of events committed to the planet's memory, which we're reliving in this first part of the remake series. The planet wants to preserve this future that's already set in stone.
The future isn't set in stone.
Fine, set in spirit energy, and thus tries to stop anyone from changing it. This is why they form a dome around Midgar, to prevent the agents of change to proceed in the story. However, Sephiroth cuts a tear into it, creating a passage to a place outside of the timeline, and thus also outside of Fate, the Lifestream's memory, also called Singularity. This might be the reason why our party suddenly becomes much more powerful and skilled in battle. The Singularity's timelessness might grant the party their combined prowess from their entire timeline stored within the Lifestream's memory. Aerith also might have had a hand in this. The Whisper Harbinger's enemy intel description, which describes the Whispers as a whole, receives a deeper meaning with this hypothesis applied. The threads of time and space that shape the planet's fate, therefore, stands for the planet's memory of its history, which it tries to preserve, as mentioned before. It's possible that Aerith and Sephiroth decide to start changing the past exactly 7 seconds before the end of the world. When the world ends, neither of them would be able to change anything anymore. Remember Sephiroth's line about the planet and its children?
All born are bound to her. Should this world be unmade, so too shall her children.
If the planet dies, all life on it does too. There's also this line from the first encounter with Sephiroth.
Our beloved planet is dying. Slowly, silently, painfully.
It's not dying for at least another 500 years, so he must be talking about the slow corruption of the Lifestream, without the possibility to achieve his goals, which leads to the planet's death.
Were the planet to die, so many things would be lost. That which binds us together would be no more, and I would be loath to live in such a world.
Here, Sephiroth refers to all the memories, which the lifestream is made of, that would cease to exist when the planet dies before he can gather it all and travel the cosmos with it. This includes his bond to Cloud, which would leave Sephiroth untethered and trapped in the negative lifestream. Also, remember this line from Sephiroth at the edge of creation, after Cloud is about to have another vision of the future.
Careful now. That which lies ahead does not yet exist. Our world will become a part of it one day, but I will not end.
Since the Whispers are not able to interfere anymore, the lifestream's memory after leaving Midgar has been made obsolete and can now be rewritten. Cloud's vision therefore depicts an event within that obsolete future, while their new future does not yet exist and has yet to be written. In this new future, Sephiroth does not intend to end as he would have in the previous version. Anyway, more on Sephiroth in a future video. Now remember Red 13's explanation about the preordained flow of the planet, from inception to oblivion. From its birth to its demise. Its whole history has therefore already been written. The Japanese version of his line, which says that the planet is about to lose its energy, also fits into our theory that the world of the living is 7 seconds away from death. Remember, time flows differently in the life stream, so it's perfectly possible to go through the whole Midgar segment, which spans roughly 5 days, before those 7 seconds run out on the surface. Aerith's explanation about Sephiroth at the end of the highway also makes more sense now.
He'd tell you that he only cares about the planet, that he'd do everything in his power to protect and preserve it. But this isn't the way it's supposed to be. There's no greater threat to the planet than him.
Sephiroth wants to preserve the planet, but only to use it as his vessel, and to keep on living indefinitely by traveling the cosmos, as Jenova did before him. That's why he's still a threat. Therefore, both future Aerith and Sephiroth, who still retain their individuality within the life stream, need to start changing its memories before the journey's starting point, Cloud and Aerith's fateful meeting in Sector 8. Aerith and Sephiroth, two opposing forces battling for the planet's fate, with Sephiroth representing Jenova, corruption, and death, and Aerith representing the Cetra, healing and life. With that in mind, Eligor's ability to foresee future events, like the platefall, might stem from its ability to read the life stream. While searching for souls with negative emotions within it, it might also see future events due to the game taking place within the life stream's memory. The planet being about to perish in 7 seconds would also explain why the flowers are unable to communicate. They only exist in its memory, like the events in this game, and thus cannot communicate anymore. After successfully remaking history and making the future into a blank slate, flowers bloom on the surface once more and are now able to say what they need to. Defeating Sephiroth and the Whispers caused the changed past to overwrite reality to the point after leaving Midgar, allowing for a new beginning to take place. In other words, the planet's future, which already happened, is wiped clean, and the present adapts to the changed past, starting with the Whispers exploding into Zack's face. How is this possible? Life forms dissolve into, and life is created from, Lifestream. Memories can also be altered through Lifestream, which itself is an accumulation of memories. That's all the planet needs to reshape and adapt reality to the changes made to its own memory. Kind of like Cloud's reality was reshaped through his messed up memories due to the trauma before he reached Midgar, which makes Zack now living so poignant. But wouldn't the planet be able to just rewrite reality at any point in time? Not quite. This is like an emergency reaction to prevent a catastrophic paradox. A changed past within the life stream that doesn't coincide with reality anymore is an unacceptable anomaly which has to be resolved. Resetting reality in any other situation would lead to unknown results and most likely cause irreparable damage, making the planet worse off than before. Now, for this reset to work, the planet uses all lifestream energy of memories post-Midgar, which is now rendered obsolete and paradoxical, to recreate the result of our changes up to defeating the Whispers in the world of the living, on the surface of the planet. However, the energy and memories used for this great reset still exist, which is why we believe that many events will still play out in a similar fashion, due to this residual imprint, so to speak. There's also still the corrupted part of the livestream, which might not even be usable for this reset and would therefore contribute to a similar chain of events, as the forces within aim to largely replicate Sephiroth's and Jenova's will and to emerge victorious this time. To conclude this elaborate analysis, allow me to condense this convoluted mess into a concise explanation. This first game happens within the livestream's memory. The souls of Aerith and Sephiroth reside within the livestream as separate, unmerged entities, and try to change the past by injecting themselves into the memories of their original game's events in Midgar. In there, both of them attempt to manipulate the events and shape the future to their preference. This might also explain their newfound abilities, like how Aerith makes her staff magically disappear, and those weird glitches, like Sephiroth stopping Aerith, Aerith transferring memories, or even some of the Sephiroth apparitions, teleportations, and feathers. Other inconsistencies could also be explained away with this, like the yellow flower disappearing after Tifa receives it, Cloud's sword shifting in and out of reality and changing positions, the pews vanishing before the battle against Reno in the church and returning again in Chapter 14, and many, many more. Anyway, after defeating the Whispers, the changes are then applied to reality to resolve the paradox which resets the future. A second chance for Aerith, Sephiroth, and the planet. This is the reason why Aerith is the utmost important character in the Final Fantasy VII Remake story. She's the ultimate healer, and the key to the planet's survival, granted through a new and unknown future. A future in which the characters won't be their original selves anymore because they now are literally changed beings compared to their former memories in the livestream.
If we succeed, if we win, we'll be changing ourselves. I just want to do everything in my power to help. All of you. And the planet.
Whew, that was a mouthful. I hope we succeeded in winning you over to this crazy conclusion of our in-depth analysis about Aerith and her new role in Final Fantasy VII Remake. We know that this last segment sounds nuts and makes it seem like Viz lost all his marbles and sanity. Even the analyst himself isn't entirely convinced, but it's still the most plausible scenario to him thus far, as other conclusions would clash with other pieces of evidence. To be fair, many of those conclusions are still rather speculative, even when derived from evidence within the game itself. And while we aim to build on those conclusions in future videos, it's still possible that new findings and discoveries will refine or even change what we presented here. Alright, do you have any questions, suggestions, counterpoints, or criticisms? Let your voice be heard in the comments, or on our Discord server. We still have other mysteries of the remake to cover, like Cloud's memory glitches, Sephiroth, and the ending, so subscribe and select all notifications to not miss out on those whenever they release. Like last time, huge thanks to the whole Final Fantasy VII Remake community, whose findings helped with refining our understanding of Aerith and her role in this gigantic remake project. And with that being said, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey through the world of Final Fantasy VII. We hope to see you again in the next analysis. Stay safe and take care. Kutakuma, signing off.